Velina Tchakarova is my name, Bulgarian in terms of country of origin, German in terms of full package of education, high school and university, and in terms of mindset, obviously, since the age of 13, and Austrian in terms of citizenship, but most of all, a very passionate European and also a very passionate liberal. Okay, now first thing first. After the abundance, and Julia obviously set the stage when it comes to internal dynamics, internal progress, and the need for innovation, economic growth, and we saw a lot of abundance when it came to slides. I have scarcity of slides. So mostly in the next half an hour, I would like to present a few ideas, few theses, to be also a little bit challenging when it comes to European liberals, because if there is one particular dimension of policy that's often missing or probably not so well covered, that's the global policy and the global geopolitical, geoeconomic, slash meanwhile geotechnological policy. But we live in this kind of world meanwhile. So my task today is actually to present some of these ideas, assessments and recommendations as someone who has been dealing with security, defense and geopolitics for 26 years now. I'm an independent geopolitical strategist since 2023, based in Vienna. And before that, I was director of security and defense think tank, also based in Vienna. And I've always worked on these topics, which are now more relevant than ever. But I will start with a picture. And it's not me, but it pretty much shows the vibe. Now, I am the last generation of the pioneers. And at that time, up until my teenage years, I was on the other side of the Iron Curtain. And we, on the other side of the curtain, were truly believing that we had the better system. We had the better political system, we had the better economic system, we had the better technological system, and we had the better ideology. And we were fighting every single day. For what? For the victory. So even though that there wasn't me next to our communist leader Todor Zhivkov, it shows you a vibe. And you know what happened, of course, in 1990 with this vibe. From one day to the next, I was sitting with my family in front of the TV, learning about the shift in Bulgaria. So we learned from the TV screens that basically there won't be a communist regime anymore, and that will be a peaceful transition. Now, what followed was the so-called, as you all know, and the liberals know that, I would say, and I would argue, probably the best, is a period of political, economic, and societal transition. And the three takeaways I have from this period for the liberals, which I think are still quite relevant, because we started with a mindset of being victorious. That means we accepted, first and foremost, those who were on the other side of the Iron Curtain, that there was a better system. It was a better political, economic, and societal system, and we wanted to join it. There was a power of conviction. And actually, my first takeaway from that time for you, my dear liberals, is that societal resilience was more important than institutions, bureaucrats, or politicians. Societal resilience was the immune system of liberal democracies. It started from the grassroots. It started from the conviction that this is something better and we want to be a part of it. The second important takeaway I have from this time, because that's not the key topic of my lecture, I just wanted to give you some sort of an important takeaway as someone who has observed these processes firsthand and was truly believer and still true believer of what happened at the time was the right thing to happen. It was that economic liberalization, So the second pillar of the economic package next to liberal democracy, no matter how painful at that time, remember the first structural reforms, how slow and how painful they were in terms of institutional change, in terms of political decision making, and also in terms of societal support. But this economic liberalization enabled the security, stability, and prosperity, which was the first sentence of the first strategic document of the European Union 20 years ago. If you take a read in the first strategic document of the European Union from 2003, the first paragraph will tell you, never was Europe so stable, so secure, and so prosperous. And it was, of course, not only thanks to the spread, the widespread of liberal democracies, not only in Central Eastern Europe, but we, of course, set the stage at the time, but also because of the liberalization, the economic liberalization model. And of course, last but not least, and I would argue even most importantly, democratic forces, at the very core of liberalism, though dispersed and imperfect, hold the line. They keep society coherent and in the long run stable. And I will come later to this point. Okay. Now let's go to the big picture. And of course, the big picture always starts with some sort of a diagnosis. And I'm very unfortunate to not be able to give you a lot of good news when it comes to the success of this story, let's say 30 years fast forward. If we take a look at the way how liberal democracies were spread as a model, were spread around the world, if you take a look at it quantitatively and qualitatively, you will find out that right now we are in a rather dire situation where we have fewer democracies than autocratic regimes. And okay, of course, 1945, only probably 20 liberal democracies. But if you take a look at the peak at around 2012, 2013, with around 100 liberal democracies, we clearly see that the trend is in decline. Now, the first pillar of our liberal model as an internationalized, let's say, approach is suffering. If you take a look also at the percentage of population that is now living under rather autocratic rule or some sort of defect democratic rule or even authoritarian rule, once again, it's the highest since 1970s, and around 40% of the global population is currently living under the framework of liberal democracies. Now, let's take a look at the second pillar. Of course, we've witnessed, and rightfully so, the greatest scope and speed of globalization under the American supremacy. So after 1990, globalization, because in previous stages of global politics, for instance, during the time of Great Britain, we had globalization. And in previous periods, once again, the global power that emerged victorious set the rules of the great game. So globalization took place indeed, and we witnessed sort of the greatest scope of free trade, of globalized supply chains, of free movement of goods and of capital and of labor, later also data and so on and so forth, without any doubt. But again, if you take a look at it as a trend and where this is now going, we will find out that basically, once again, this is a trend in decline. And in fact, it's a trend in decline because it's coming from both sides, from non-democratic actors, state actors, but also from democratic state actors. Why? Because suddenly the liberal economic model is no longer performing the way it used to be, and more statecraft policies are necessary when it comes to protection, or when it comes to coercion, or when it comes to facing new realities in the field of geoeconomics. Think of dependencies on certain raw materials, or rare earths, or semiconductors, or supply chains, or production lines, and so on and so forth. So we are again, when it comes to the second pillar, in a situation where things do not look the way they used to. And then, of course, the third important pillar in global politics, what is it? It is about the question of peace and war. Because at the core of international relations is always the question of peace and war. State actors that exercise great power will always be inclined into referring to that. And if they don't find a solution by peaceful means, they will be inclined into going into war. And that's an axiomatic rule in geopolitics that refers to both democracies and non-democracies. Now, think about, once again, I will go back very, very shortly to the case of the spread of liberal democracies. What was at the core of it was also the conviction on behalf of the collective West that, based on the democratic peace, going back to Immanuel Kant, that democracies tend to wage less wars against each other. And it's not because of kings or because of the authoritarian rule of a government that takes the decision on peace or war, but it's because of the citizens that are reluctant to go into a war. So basically, this kind of rule was at the core of the idea to spread democracies, coupled with the Western model of liberal economy, and coupled, of course, with the Western model of liberalization of societies. Now, I'm not justifying the failure of this concept. I'm just explaining why it actually happened. Was it a conscious perception of a failure per se? I would actually doubt so, because I would argue that at that time, those who were pushing for this approach were convinced that it will be the right way to decrease the level of volatility of military conflicts and wars on the global arena. And for a certain period of time, it did work that way. It did not mean that democracies did not wage wars against non-democratic regimes or authoritarian ruled governments. But the point here is that right now, if we take a look at the number of wars and military conflicts, once again, coming to the third pillar, we are observing a trend in decline. The number of wars and military conflicts is the highest since the end of the Second World War. Obviously, the highest also since the end of the Cold War. We are in a different scenario. We are already in a different context, geopolitically and geoeconomically, whether we like it or not. And whether we want to face it or not, the point is there is no point of return without facing it. So now, where are we exactly geopolitically? And the majority of security experts and geopolitical experts will claim we are in this transition period of international relations that points to some sort of multipolarity, many power centers around the world. We saw from Julia's slides, the European Union is a geoeconomic power on par with China and with the US. And once we face the reality, think of the so-called tariff negotiations with our dear American friends, or where we faced certain conflictual situations with our Chinese partners, think of semiconductors, think of rare earths, we've suddenly witnessed that there was one major issue that was prevalent and was actually decisive for the way how our bilateral relationship with these two great powers, with these two new superpowers, in what President Trump described as G2 world, that suddenly these relationships were shaped by what? By security calculus. By security calculus. That means that security comes first. Now, the time when we created interdependencies so that we decrease the level of conflict, so that we actually incentivize competitors to remain peaceful, this time is over. What should we do about it? Now, if you take a look at it, and this is what I argue, and this is my first thesis for you today, derived from the current geopolitical assessment, is that it's not a multipolarity. If you take a look at the global arena, at the very, very top of the global system, you will find exactly three powers. The triumvirate of global power competition. On the one hand, the US under the Trump administration 2.0, with this new mindset of the masks are off. We want to face the Chinese challenge on all fronts, except for one, and that is obviously the military front. There is this clear understanding on behalf of both powers, China and United States, that there is no way that they should be engaged in a direct military confrontation. That's already good news. The bad news, of course, is that anything below the threshold of a direct confrontation, anything below this threshold is allowed, is desired, is necessary, because the winner takes all. We see this mindset on both sides. Of course, in different implications, with different scope, with different speed, but we see this in the geopolitical arena, we see this in the geoeconomic arena, we see this in the geotechnological arena. Now, what's missing? And this is my second takeaway for you for today. It's this wrong assessment and wrong attitude to separate China and Russia from each other because of their natural rivalry over a long historical period of time. Because they've never been that close to each other as it is today. We missed the last 10 years of a period of rapprochement between these two, not out of conviction, not out of ideology, not even out of strategic alliance, the way we in the West understand strategic alliances, based on values, shared interests, and long-term interoperability and cooperation. No, but these two, they found each other. They started the rapprochement back in 2013. You know what happened in 2013? Chairman Xi Jinping took over, and they are same age with the Russian president. And what started was this top-down, strictly top-down, at the beginning, actually reluctantly observed, especially in the West, but even in their own circles, observed in disbelief process of slow but steady coordination in all strategically important domains. The dragon bear emerged. So what we have is not just multipolarity again, it's a bifurcation between two centers of power, but on the other side we have two powers coordinating in all strategically relevant domains. For what? First and foremost, to push away the American global power projection. Because these two have pretty much the same understanding of the way how the world order should look like. They can separate forces, they can split fields of activities, they can actually separate the world, if you wish. This is why it took the European Union 3.5 years to understand, and the Chinese foreign minister had to openly admit it in a meeting with our top diplomat, Kaja Kallas, that it's not in the interest of China for Russia to lose the war against Ukraine. Second takeaway, it's America versus the dragon bear, and it's global competition, and the winner takes all. And right now, we are in between. We haven't made our mind about whether we are once again belonging, because let's be honest right now, ideologically, European decision making, process and European politicians, a lot of them who are in charge, and American administration are far, far away ideologically. But then again, when it comes to technology, siding with the one or with the other, because obviously we are not a technological superpower. And then, of course, the question about peace and war. The European Union hasn't been, is not, and will not be a geopolitical actor. And the simple truth behind this statement is this: there won't be a single European Union bureaucrat who will ever take the decision about peace or war, and in that sense, about that of European Union soldiers, when it comes to protecting the sovereignty of European Union territory. That's still, of course, the legitimacy. It's up to the legitimacy and up to the sovereignty of national states. That means, of course, by extension, national governments who bear the responsibility for the life of each single citizen of theirs. Now, this is not a judgment. This is just a statement derived from reality. I think this third key takeaway is something that liberals should also have to, should start internalizing and facing as a reality. Where are we right now? Good. We might argue, we might slide into something such as multipolarity if there would be another center of power, like, for instance, India could emerge as a third economic power center, is en route to becoming world's economic power number 3, next to China and America. In this decade, by the way, it has the military means, it has the mindset to use its military power for the sake of national interests, and it also has, to a certain extent, a kind of overlapping or shared interests with the so-called collective West. But so far, we are in what I described, a bifurcating global system, 2 centers of power, the dragon bear on the one side, with Russia trying to destroy the European security order, trying to take over the old continent in terms without the need of waging a conventional war, but at the same time trying to subjugate the second largest European country, which is Ukraine, and that all is supported, facilitated, long-term, comprehensively facilitated with Chinese support, with Chinese aid, in every possible way you can imagine. The same goes for China, of course, which wants to establish itself first and foremost in the Indo-Pacific and in the broader context, of course, against the American power projection. This is the age of the gray zone warfare. As I said, at least one good news for today so far is that there is no incentive on behalf of China and Russia on the one hand, but also United States on the other, to get involved in a direct military confrontation with each other. Of course, the bad news derived from this good news is that they are even more inclined into participating in proxy wars and supporting proxy forces in other regions, which is why the number of conflicts and wars has significantly increased. Now, hybrid warfare means not just the playbook from the First Cold War, which we've known far too well, but it means also new new means of warfare. One of them, of course, is the weaponization of dependencies. The very same dependencies that our liberal model has created by conviction and is now turning against us, because we've created a lot of interdependencies. Think of the example of the Russian warfare against Ukraine, how Russia in fact started to weaponize energy commodities ahead of the beginning of the war, which was a very strong indicator for me and for my colleagues to start worrying about a serious event that later happened basically in 2022, but it started already in 2021, and it was a great indicator that was showing that a certain preparation. Commodities coercion, meanwhile, 3.5 years later, is just the casual playbook. I mean, we can release so many different examples of the way how not just China or Russia, but meanwhile also the US, of course, on the other hand, are using certain coercion tactics to exercise pressure, on the one hand, on allies, to lure them into their own orbit, to pressure them to take sides, because it's this division period and every single ally or partner counts. But also when it comes to new unprecedented tools like the nuclear blackmail, for the very first time in international relations, a state actor has started threatening with the use of nuclear weapons. Not because the state actor was intending to use them, but because the benefits from the psychological terror, from the political pressure by using this nuclear blackmail was good enough. And that was the case of Russia. Meanwhile, we have other examples as well of nuclear powers who are trying to use this nuclear blackmail card. Of course, as I already mentioned, in the middle of the Fourth Industrial Revolution, and we heard a lot and we saw a lot from the slides in the first presentation, once again, we are in the middle of a industrial revolution. Same happened during the First Cold War. Same happened in the 70s when this competition was decided in favor of the US against the Soviet Union. And the rest was, so to say, a period of managing collapse. So basically, by the mid of 70s, the United States decided the Third Industrial Revolution in their favor, and the final 15 years were more or less a kind of a managed decline on behalf of the Soviet Union. Right now, we are at the beginning of this process. We do not know exactly who the winner is going to be. What we know for a fact is that neither United States nor China can compete against each other in the technological domain on their own. They will need partners. They will need partners for the rare earths or for the raw materials. We've heard already what kind of abundance model it will be required on behalf of the natural resources for the technological transformation. On top of the energy transformation, because every industrial revolution is also about the addition of a new energy source to the matrix. And right now we have the renewables. Renewables are here to stay. It's only about the perfect mixture of everything. So far, as we've seen also from the slides, it's not about excluding energy sources, but it's about how to find the perfect addition of all of them so that actually it works for the sake of national interests. And of course, this is a gray zone warfare where war is undeclared and ever present. You saw also the slide with the hybrid, with the hybrid threats in terms of drone incursions, in terms of violations of airspace by military jets. That's the new normal. It's here. It's not going to go away. We better face it, and we better look back what really worked well, because not everything is doom and gloom and dire and desperate. I would argue we still have some very, very good cards, and I hope that the cards are not made in China, of course. Now, information is weaponized, institutions are attacked daily, society is object of warfare. We, every one of us, are objects of hybrid warfare. We are like open box of chocolates. Everybody else, every foreign power can actually grab a chocolate, can do whatever they like, because that's the way our system works. When it comes to global geopolitics, I think, and I would argue that liberalism's biggest challenge is to find Europe's geopolitical position, right? To address the issue of what kind of geopolitical position Europe should take in this. It's a challenging process to first arrive at the same position, to develop, let's say, a coherent view, but also to address the unpleasant part of it, to look in the mirror and find out that geopolitically we are more or less naked, right? And now, of course, one specific issue is the political fragmentation from within, but also from without, which, of course, is a big hurdle to come up with a coherent view. Another one is that the European NATO, so that means the European pillar of NATO, is still very much dependent on the US. And in fact, and sorry to say, but in 2025, we are more dependent on the US, not only when it comes to security and defense, but also when it comes to technology, when it comes to market access, when it comes to energy and other raw materials. We are more dependent, which is why strategic autonomy as a concept remains elusive. It's nice to talk about strategic autonomy because this is a buzzword, but it's a buzzword and nothing more than that. It's not that it's not because it's not realistic, but if we want to go this path, we have to give up on many other things and achievements. And the list is very, very long for the next 10, 15 years. And I would argue that our citizens will not be ready to do so. Now, what should liberalism do in 2025 against this background? Now that we know the strategic trilemma of Europe, we know that Europe is more dependent. So basically it shifted from dependence on China for production and Russia for energy and US for security. It shifted towards the Americans, even though that we are propagating the strategic autonomy. And we have also another strategic trilemma, which is the trilemma, and it was already touched upon by Julia. It's the trilemma between defense gaps, deindustrialization, and decarbonization agenda. It's an impossible agenda because something's got to give. And we are not ready to give up on any of these three important pillars of the second triangle. So I would go for 4 recommendations. The moral fatigue of liberalism. We have to address this. There is a real moral fatigue among liberals. And it's cross countries, cross societal groups. It's here. It's because of all these bad news that we feel like we are losing the narrative. The second important recommendation is derived from the statement that liberalism has been blind to power politics, to the return of geopolitics. The third recommendation is derived from what I call the democratization of irresponsibility. And the fourth recommendation I have is derived from liberalism as defender of against economic hubris and political collapse. And it goes like that. The moral fatigue of liberalism is something that we can really address. We can start today. It's something that we did before. And it's something that goes back to the grassroots. It's not up to the institutions. It's not up to the political decision makers. It's up to every single citizen. And we are not allowed to be in a moral fatigue because of the reality, what's at stake. So that's first. Go back to the grassroots. Start actively exercising courage. It's about courage to face the reality. It's about courage to face every single day. And what lies behind it is the successful story we had once. We did it already once. And we were successful. We had the longer breath. We have soul in the game. Second important recommendation. Yes, liberalism was blind to the emergence or re-emergence of power politics. But it means that, again, we have the courage to learn from the mistakes. And we know for a fact how to do it. First point, and I know this is very inconvenient, what I'm going to say now. We do not have 10 to 15 years for strategic autonomy. We do not have the time. What we have are still other like-minded partners. This second recommendation is not about the internal issues we are facing. It's about the externality of the problems. Here, first and foremost, we have to strengthen the Euro-Atlantic bond. Of course, we have to be on par. Of course, it has to be a kind of an equal relationship, but we can only improve it if we are an active part of it, and not if we isolate ourselves and if we actually do not participate actively in it. Second important takeaway when it comes to the second recommendation is that we have other like-minded partners, but it doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to fit all the, click all the boxes. That means like-minded partners do not have to be ideologically on the same page as us. We will find them in Latin America, we will find them in North America, we will find them in Africa, and we will find them in every corner of Asia. And the third important takeaway from my second block is actually that we have already won a Cold War once. We have the equipment, we have the toolbox, we have the mindset, and we are able. So that means we need to get our act together. Democratization of irresponsibility. What does it mean? It means that we conveyed to our citizens that liberalism only applies to their rights, but never to their duties. It was only the one side of the equation. That must change. It's not the one. You will never, ever have the benefits of liberal rights and freedoms without the responsibility. And that is something that actually needs to change as a process in terms of convincing our citizens that out of all different ideologies right now, this one has already won because of the conviction of each and every single citizen that there is no better solution. Finally, economic hubris and political collapse. It's the liberals who are right now trying, not so successfully, but hopefully in the future more successfully, to keep things together. Because if you take a look on the right, if you take a look on the left, if you take a look at the center, you have a rise of new Marxism, rise of new fascism, and rise of nationalism, because also of the realities of global geopolitics. And liberals are the ones that can prevent societies and the coherence of societies from state interference and from actually political collapse for the sake of a minority of decision makers that thinks and is convinced that knows things better. So once again, here what we need is skin in the game. And it goes back in all of the 4 recommendations to grassroots activism, work, conviction, but most of all, soul in the game. It's the role model, it's the action of each one of us. And once we believe that we are part of something bigger, that's much more important and makes much more sense. So we find back the purpose. Then we are on track to face the reality of Cold War 2.0 between America and the Dragon Bear. Thank you very much.